This is a virtual reading of Conspirators, To Each His Own Agenda by Matt Gupta.
Chapter 57. The Lord Warden's Barricade. The night had been correct. Pillimore had led his clansmen to the base of the high temple and had fought up the stairs. The wardens at the top had done nothing to help the men on the stairs, but when the last man fell, they all sprang into their hoplite poses. They resembled an arrowhead with the Lord Warden at the tip. There were 100 of them, so they filled the open space from wall to wall. The forces crashed against them without restraint or caution. It was exactly how the wardens preferred to fight. They had created a shield wall with their kite shields locked in a solid wall of metal and spears. They let their attackers smash into them and knock them back 3 paces. But then the Lord Warden shouted in the ancient tongue, and they smashed their attackers back. 100 spears thrust forward, and 100 men fell. They took up their formation again, and again, and again. There seemed no end in sight. Pillimore and his forces had taken the full brunt of the onslaught, and they were paying greatly. The clansmen were experts in shock tactics, and worked best when they could break through formations with their first impact. Here they could do no such thing, and were scrumming against the shield wall, being crushed by their own men and their huge weapons. They were trapped. It was turning into a slaughter. Falthor rode over to Pillimore, who was trying to disentangle his own troops from the massive meat grinder. Baranis and her troops had just arrived as well. "Pillimore," Falthor shouted, "pull your men back." "What the fuck do you think I'm trying to do?" Pillimore shouted. "Fall back, you whores. What's the matter with you?" He picked up a man equally as large as himself and threw him away. "Reform." "How many men are there?" Falthor couldn't see the fighting at the top of the stairs. "No more than 100, Pillimore shouted. "We haven't even made a single scratch on them. Bastards," he shouted up the stairs. "Baranis," Falthor shouted. "Get your troops into position. Your shield wall is all that can stand against them." Baranis said nothing, but nodded. She shouted to her troops in Germanic, and Vitalian relayed those orders. Over the course of the next 20 minutes, the army was reorganized. The clansmen had fallen back, but the stairs were littered with their fallen brothers. It made things difficult for the shield wall, but eventually they got into position. Falthor had been right. The wall held much better than the charging Scots, but they still weren't inflicting any damage against the wardens. Baranis was rotating the shield wall every minute, but the wardens were still killing them faster than they could rotate away. "Pillum," Vitalian shouted to the rear lines, and suddenly the air was thick with throwing spears. The Lord Warden shouted in the ancient tongue, and the wardens kicked their attackers back. The wardens stooped, their shields over their head, and the spears crashed in the solid metal. 10 of the wardens were slain, and the rest fell back to a narrower point of the entrance. The phalanx was broken, however, and the shield wall advanced, breaking formation and charging. The wardens then threw their spears and drew their swords. They fought in the doorway to the high temple and easily bested their attackers. Their flow and focus was devastating. They disarmed and killed each opponent as if they were only attacking them one at a time. Before long, even Baranis' soldiers were hesitant to fight. The Lord Warden sliced down at the last man, and then the wardens resumed their shield formation, only with swords instead of spears. "Kingslayer," Falthor called. "Their armor is weakest at their elbow." Gilorn nodded and looked up at the rooftops. The fighting resumed, but the wardens were on the offensive now. They smashed against the shield wall, but found multiple holes in it, cutting through the first line of the wall. Gearlorn had climbed up a building and was making the hard journey to another. He was now quite practiced in climbing Roman buildings. By comparison, in the village where he had grown up, he could climb up a house in a matter of seconds, something that he and Eorlum enjoyed doing as adolescents. But here, the buildings were massive and smooth, with few places to grip. Finally, he managed it and reached the roof of a building tall enough so that he could see the wardens clash with the shield wall. He crouched and nocked an arrow. He aimed with his eyes, not the arrow, pulling the shaft right to his ear. The world seemed to slow down around him as he watched the fighting continue. The wardens were fighting like lions, but still showed no sign of relenting. They quickly discovered that they could not break through the shield wall and fell back with huge leaps. The shield wall paused for a moment and then broke formation to rush at them. One by one, the wardens fought against the shield wall. Some scored hits against their shields or armor, but the wardens held fast, fighting just short of having their backs to the wall. A sergeant of the shield wall was fighting the Lord Warden. He seemed to be doing quite well, in that the Lord Warden hadn't killed him with a single blow. Several parries and blocks later, the Lord Warden won, slicing in a long downward arch, leaving a gap between himself and the Goths. Gearlorn took his shot, firing at the Lord Warden. The arrow whistled through the air, but none heard it over the din of the battle. There weren't any archers in the shield wall, so no one expected to see an arrow flying through the air. The Lord Warden was midway through adjusting his posture from a slice to an outward stab. His cry of pain echoed around the high temple steps. For a moment, the whole battle stopped, as the Lord Warden froze on the spot, the arrow protruding from the join in his shield arm. Another arrow flew through the air and caught him in his armored chest, and then a third in his heel. It seemed to take him an age to fall to the ground, an age in which his men were frozen, watching him in horror. It was the first time that the wardens of the Fountain Court showed any emotion. The battle stopped entirely, as the whole city appeared to be watching the Lord Warden fall. He hit the stone with a crash of metal, and his sword clattered to the floor. The shield wall pounced, and the warden lines were broken. Gearlorn's work was done. Brilliant though the wardens were, they could not fill the gap left by their Lord Warden, and the remaining men were no match for the 1,000 falling upon them. They cut so many men down before they fell, and finally the shield wall was at the doors of the High Temple. The bodies of the wardens and their Lord Commander were being paraded down the stairs, over the heads of the soldiers. It was meant as humiliation, but neither the dead nor those barely living made any sound or sign of distress as they were carried off to who knew where. The High Temple doors boomed as the pews and benches holding the doors closed began to fall away. Dorvan seemed unconcerned. His men did not share his feelings. "Captain," one of the lieutenants shouted to him over the echoes of the breaking wood. "What are your orders?" Dorvan looked up at him. "I think I finally understood what the Lord Warden was saying. The dead do not complain about war. If we die here, we will die, and it won't matter. Sir, we must do something." "We have been doing something." Dorvan smiled reassuredly at him and used him to prop himself to stand. "No matter what we do here, we will die. Time for us to accept that and use it as armor." The doors exploded open, sending the benches tumbling in every direction. The men of the shield wall and the clansmen poured in. The few warriors that were left, that hadn't already surrendered, tried to put up a fight, but they were quickly overwhelmed and slaughtered. Dorvan rested on his man until the attackers were right up against them and then raised his free arm in surrender. The men were unsure what to do with him. Under normal circumstances, they would slaughter everyone, but now everyone comprised of women and children. "Would you spill blood in this holy place?" Dervin said to them. "I would." "There will be no more bloodshed," Barani shouted, first in Germanic, then in the common tongue. She had come through the doors after her men. "Captain Dervin," she called, as she approached him, "you are now my prisoner. All of your Citadel guardsmen are my prisoners." "What of the Lord Warden?" Dervin asked. "Is he your prisoner also?" "Do you accept my terms?" Barani's ignored his request with a raised eyebrow, her hand clenching on her axe. Dervin sighed. This was no time for negotiations. He nodded. "I accept, my lady." Barani's cut him with an axe thrust across his face. "I am no lady. Take them." With the fall of the temple, the city was taken. There was some resistance from the few hundred men who had escaped the district, but the Sea War generals had taken a personal insult in their resistance and had fought even harder for it. When Baranis and Pilimor were done with herding the civilians in the temple, they went to the citadel with their lieutenants and captains. They made the long climb to the citadel gardens, the only place in the city where there were no dead bodies. Alistair's knights had taken the role of the wardens and the citadel guardsmen. "So," Pilimor grunted, "this is the fountain that everyone strokes their cocks about." "Apparently so," Baranis grimaced, looking it up and down. Neither of them had ever seen it. "Not exactly awe-inspiring, is it?" Pilimor was in agreement. "Have a statue of a naked woman with massive teats and her legs spread open, and that would inspire any man to die for a lost cause." "Or a woman," Baranis nodded. She slapped him on his arm. "Come, our lord waits for us." They entered the hall. Falthor was sitting in the steward's chair, having left them to round up the prisoners. He was looking up at Alistair on the throne. They were receiving victory gifts from the nobility in his armies and supporters in the city, while simultaneously being attended to by a healer. The air rang with healing scents as a priest was swinging an incense pot in front of the throne. Alistair was deathly pale. The sycophants had apparently been there a while. "It seems our king declared victory before the battle was actually won," Baranis muttered, disapprovingly. Pilimor huffed, unconcerned. "War is rich men talking and better men dying. It is the way of things and always has been. Let us see what the fuckers have to excuse themselves from fighting." Lord Blackburn had presented Alistair with some kind of silver scepter. He had been droning on in his monotonous tone as to its origins. His family had been given it by the second-to-last king after some heroic battle, whose details had been lost in his lengthy description, and Alistair was quickly losing patience with it. "Thank you, Lord Blackburn," he said, cutting him off, while he was in the middle of describing the colour of his ancestor's horse. "I shall treasure it and wield it on my coronation." He jerked his head towards a knight, who took the scepter and escorted Lord Blackburn away. The next was Stormworth. He didn't have anything. Alistair inclined his head. "Perhaps you are in the wrong hall, my lord," he said jokingly. "This is a place to present gifts for winning the war." "Gifts," Stormworth grunted. "I have given enough to this war, and victory does not seem to compensate me for what I have given." "Watch your tongue, lord," Falthor growled. "You are addressing your king." "He's no king yet," Stormworth tilted his head in defiance. "I offer you the lives of the men I have lost in this war, my lord. That is my gift to you." This was met with a great degree of muttering amongst the others. Pilimor chuckled at the man's gall. Surprisingly, Alistair simply looked amused as well. "I thank you for your gift, Lord Stormworth. as well as your honesty. I swear I will repay it with interest." The threat had no veil to it, and everyone knew it, but Stormworth feigned ignorance. The doors opened, and 2 Knights of Islesfield entered the hall. They were supporting Decimus between them. "My son," Alistair called, raising his good hand. The crowd parted to let them through. The indignation of the next to speak fell on deaf ears. "It is good to see you whole." Decimus blinked at Alistair on his throne. "It is good for me also, father-in-law. But I must ask, where is my wife?" "She and my grandson are in the Queen's quarter," Alistair reassured him. "Take my lord to see his son." They escorted Decimus out, and the ceremony continued. Finally, all of the nobles were done, and the generals were all that were left. Felthor stood. "Shall we discuss business?" "Let's." Alistair clapped his hands. "Wine," he bellowed with an unforeseen strength to his servants, who had been waiting before the throne. "My friends," he raised a filled goblet, with his one working hand after a few moments. "To victory." "To the king," Pillimore corrected, "the architect of our victory." This was a toast they could all drink to. They all downed their goblets. Baranis finished hers first and let out a loud belch. "Now, where is Ignatius?" Alistair grunted, the wine spilling from his slackened mouth. He dropped the cup unconcerned, and a servant rushed over to collect it. "Is he dead, or has he simply skulked off into a corner?" "I have some news on that," Turgon piped up from his litter. "Bring in the Kingslayer and his spy master friend." They waited for a moment, and then Gilorn and Eorlim came into the hall. Baranis and Pillimore had never laid eyes on them before, but they had heard much about them. Baranis had been particularly impressed by Gilorn's story. The fact that he had risen from his origins to her attentions had moved her, as had his Dacian heritage. Pillimore seemed to only see Dacians, and he grumbled to himself, snarling. Though his clothing and cleanliness were poor after spending so much time in danger, he still entered with confidence. He took each of them in turn as he walked, however, his eyes lingering on Pillimore for a long moment. Eorlim strode in as if he owned the hall, but he rapidly found his composure when he saw everyone looking at him. Turgon laughed to himself as they approached and bowed. "Kingslayer," Alistair smiled, "it is good to see you again. I understand that you and your fellow rangers were instrumental in rescuing my daughter from her doom. You have my thanks and the prospect of deep rewards." Gilorn looked up and inclined his head in acknowledgement, then returned to look at the ground. "General Turgon tells me you have word of what happened to Ignatius. Does he speak true?" "He does, Prince." Gilorn nodded once, and they straightened up. "We saw the steward in this very hall. He attempted to arrest your daughter and grandchild. With the aid of 2 Citadel guardsmen, his mercenaries were defeated and he was dethroned." "You tore him from the throne," Pillimore laughed. Gilorn shook his head, wincing from the man's roar of laughter. "He fell from the throne, even when he was on his knees and our swords red with his men's blood. He still had venom in his soul." "What became of him?" Baranis asked. Her eyes narrowed. She was the first to process this, deeming the story easy to believe. Turgon laughed again. "This is where it gets interesting. We let him live and demanded that he leave. He left through that door." He pointed at the side door that Ignatius had left through. "You let him live and leave?" Alistair demanded, leaning forward, anger filling his eyes. Gilorn immediately knew he had misspoken, but Falthor had often told him he wasn't an accomplished liar, so he told the truth. "I." He looked down at the floor, trying to conceal his nerves. He spoke quickly. The man is a shadow of his former self. His eyes roll in his head, His hands shake and his mind has left him. He is broken. Broken, Alistair spat. Broken, he repeated. His voice suddenly exploded into a shout. Do you not realize that as long as his chest has a breath in it, he is a threat to me? Pillimore laughed, watching the rangers squirm. Yes, my lord. King. Gilorn corrected himself. But even the citadel guards did not have concern for him. I asked them if they would bring him back, but they thought it better to watch over the princess and her babe. Cameron, Alistair shouted to the citadel captain. What make you of this? Cameron nodded. We would rather protect a woman and babe than that of a crazed, hated old man. Any man they would have sent to find Ignatius would have been one less man defending your daughter, Felthor put in. And yet their actions let our sworn enemy escape, Pillimore interrupted, folding his massive arms. I will not see all this work undone by a ranger, Kingslayer or no. Gilorn looked at him. No offence, ranger, Pillimore added, in what passed for an apologetic tone. You seem like a good sort. But he did deliver you the last vestige of the city, Baranis argued. His arrow took down the Lord Warden Commander, something that our own king could not do. Alistair apparently did not know this. Is this true? Felthor nodded. Aye, 3 arrows was all it took. Alistair sighed, falling back into his throne. The Father clearly guides your arrows, Kingslayer. Your service has been invaluable. He sighed irritably again, which turned into several pants. In future, remember that it is I who decides who will live and who will die, not you. Kingslayer, you are forgiven. This time. Thank you, my Lord King, Gilorn bowed. My bow is yours as always. You have my thanks also, King, Yorlem bowed. You are not forgiven, Spymaster. Alistair pointed to him. Your rangers have reported your actions in the city. You have slain your own brothers as well as had the insolence to sit in my throne. Your actions deserve death, and death will be yours. My lord, Gilorn rushed forward, to step in front of Yorlem. I beg you mercy. Mercy is not yours to ask for, Felthor responded sternly. Your lord is a king. My kinsman did what he had to protect your daughter. Gilorn ignored his general. The rangers slain endangered our cause and threatened to dishonor your daughter should they find her. I would have killed them for less, Yorlem said, unhelpfully. I would make the same choice thrice again. These words impacted on everyone, Turgon in particular. His skills as a spy are bested by none in the kingdom. He nodded at the man's brazenness. Why waste his talents? Let him swear an oath to us and none other. I am already yours. No, Felthor scowled. You are mine. Your loyalty is to your king now. He owns all of you now. Your head will remain on your shoulders at his pleasure. Alistair smiled at Yorlem's indignation, but, for once, Yorlem had the sense to keep silent. Tell me, Kingslayer, he turned to Gilorn. If I were to ask you, and your friend, to kill a man we consider an ally, would you do it without question? Gilorn's immediate answer was yes, but Felthor's message about not having any corruption sprung into his head. Without question, he pretended to think on it. No, I'd ask how much you would pay me for the task and my silence. This was apparently a very good answer, as everyone was smiling, but none more than Felthor. Alistair nodded, impressed, and looked to Yorlem. And you, spy, what of you? I would ask who? Yorlem folded his arms as he always did when conducting business. And how long I have to kill them. Then you will be of considerable use to me. Survive this task and you will receive your pardon. Do not survive and you need not worry.